You're listening to the EquiRatings Eventing Podcast, the show with a light-hearted look at the eventing world, all of the big event previews, reviews, and special guests, and of course, backed up with all of the key EquiRating stats. Welcome to the EquiRatings Eventing Podcast. Welcome to the EquiRatings Eventing Podcast and a brand new series. So this is the first episode in a new series called Horse Heroes, which, as the name might suggest, is going to look at some of our favourite horses of all time, some of the best horses of all time, and we're going to delve a little bit deeper into their careers, their highlights, and just what made them so special. Now, Spike is with me because, Spike, when we were talking about possibly doing the show, you said if we do this one, you are definitely on it.
You like wild horses wouldn't have. Being on call wouldn't even stop me from being on this one.
I mean, it's a horse that we have spoken about on this podcast a lot. I think we actually muted the idea last year that we were going to do a special episode on him because he deserves it. It is none other than Shannondale Titan, who has been an absolute stalwart for Australia and for Bill Levett for many years. He's been a firm favourite in the Event Rider Masters series, which is where perhaps a lot of listeners will be familiar with in recent years. And we have Bill with us to talk about some of his highlights. Bill, welcome to your first ever podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, pleased to be here and happy to, give you a bit of insight into, my time with Alfie.
He was an absolute star. So Shannondale Titan, Alfie to his friends. He's 17 now. He retired at the back end of 2019. Bill, just tell us about sort of where he came from, because I believe he was bred over in Ireland. He was by Limerick, or he is by Limerick.
That's right, yeah.
And he came over to the owners as a very young horse, is that right?
He did. It's a bit sketchy for me in the early days because I wasn't involved with him until he was probably a nearly intermediate level. So there's a few years that the Prentice family have always owned him, and they've been unbelievable supporters for what we do here. But another girl called Gemma Hall did a very good job producing him as a young horse, and so she took him through his early years and up to novice. So I think he came from Sally Parkin. I think that was where initially Spike might have looked after him in the early years, so he probably knows a bit more about him than me.
I think you did, didn't you, Spike?
Yeah. So my vet practice have been the vets for the wonderful owners, the Prentice family, who are just absolute stars and have been huge supporters of eventing. I mean, proper supporters at every level, really. Claire Prentice, who is Anne's daughter and is sort of officially the owner, is a commentator as well, like yourself, Nicole. And
and a controller, very good one.
A controller, and is heavily involved with sort of volunteering through BE as well. So, when you talk about a family that are really ingrained in the sport, from at every level, really, and and Alfie is that sort of dream horse. You buy a young horse from Ireland as a 4-year-old. They had the lovely Gemma Hall, who was sort of based at their yard, so based at home with them, and rode their horses. They had a few horses in training at the time, and she produced the youngsters for them and rode a couple of the others. And Gemma produced Alfie from a 4-year-old through from that was 2007. So I think she carried on up. She carried on up into 2011, if I remember rightly. She did some intermediates, short, what are now 3 stars, and up to his sort of what he started as his first long 3-star at Houghton in 2011. But, in that time, he was produced really patiently. He was always a big horse, needed time. I first met him in 2009. He always seemed to find, even from the beginning, would find ways of seeing the vet regularly, but not from any kind of major problems, just finding problems, just little things.
Maybe he was just very fond of you, Spike.
Well, he became no, I don't think he's ever probably been that fond of me. But he would find it. I think he'd find a problem where there really wasn't one. So he got produced at the level. I think he was on what used to be the the Equine Pathway, as it was known. The world-class program, I think, had a thing called the Equine Pathway, and he was on that with Gemma, and he'd sort of been, highlighted by some of the guys higher up in the, in the British team, or the powers that be in those days. So he was, even from a young horse, he'd been sort of picked and spotted as being as something, a horse that would be really, really serious, and potentially a team horse in the future years when he was older. So he showed loads of promise and loads of talent from a young horse, but it was always a big frame. He's a big horse, and needed to be produced patiently and sympathetically, and that was done by Gemma, based at the Prentice family home. So his younger years, he was given time to mature, and then from that he went on and blossomed with Bill.
Bill, when he first came to you, what was your initial thoughts on him? Did you think that he was going to take you all the way to the World Championships and the World Equestrian Games?
Yeah, it was obvious. It was apparent that he had a lot of ability. Yeah, straight away, because he was such. He had a very good mind, totally genuine horse. Like, if he was one of your friends, he would be the one that you could always rely on to, be there for you. So he had a wonderful giving temperament, and that was evident right from the start. And he had an enormous length of stride, and we all know, in terms of his ability to move and to create a lovely presence, it was always apparent that he had ability. But with all these horses at intermediate and 2-star level, it's a journey when you get to that level to see, what sort of competitions suit them, and each stage you find out whether they're capable of the next stage, etc. But it was exciting. I remember one of the early intermediates, I came back to Claire and Mike and Anne, and I said, wow, this horse feels like the real deal, feels like it really would go up a level and be a competitive upper level horse, And whatever you want to say, having a horse like that, they don't come along all the time, they're quite unique, and a horse that's got ability and a good temperament and that sort of stuff. So it was a real buzz for me to have those first few competitions on him and start to feel that here's a horse with scope and movement and jump, and so it was very exciting.
He actually moved up the levels pretty quickly. Then he went to Saumur for it would have been his first long format at 4-star, 3-star as it was at the time. Then back in 2013. And he finished on his dressage score to take the win. I think, if my memory serves me correctly, I think I may have been actually working with Claire that weekend. So we were following your progress. I don't think she was out there, was she?
No.
I'm pretty certain. Yeah, I'm pretty certain we were at an event somewhere in the UK trying to keep up to date with everything that was happening in Saumur. And the sort of that immediate happiness and elation when he won, and then you sort of thoughts turned to what could be next. But at that point, did you think actually this can be a real team horse for Australia for me?
Yes, I always thought that he was a horse that could do well at the championships. I remember when he did eventually go to the World Championships, after the dressage phase, I think he was 11th or something, and he always had that look at me feeling. That was the run in Saumur was great for him, and it was great for me. I'd been to Saumur many times over the years, and I think I'd come 6th, 5th, 4th, 3rd, and 2nd, and I'd never won it. And to win it on Alfie was just so good. And he jumped such a beautiful show jump round, and it was one of those things where I delivered a good ride, and that was the great thing about Alfie. If you gave him the sort of ride he needed, he was nearly always there to deliver his part of the bargain. And I remember, I must have come 3rd or something, and Andrew Nicholson won it one year, and I was 3rd, or might have even been 2nd. And he looked down on the podium and he said, you'll win one of it. You'll win this one day. Don't worry. So this particular year, Andrew was at the start gate, and I was down warming up, and I was last to go because I was in the lead after the cross country, and of course it was quite sweet because as I was coming in, Andrew rushed up to me just before I was getting to the start box, and he said, he's had one down. He's had one down. Don't panic. He was desperate for me to really, he was excited for me that, come on, you've got this now. Look, you've got one rail in hand now. And that was, so it was a really, it was just lovely because when you have owners as well that are so loyal and so great, it's just great for them to have those days in the sun, where they really, everything comes together and the plan comes together and the horse shows its ability off in a great way. And it's just one of those moments where you think, wow, that's very satisfying.
It absolutely is. And he went then to badminton the following year, completed there before it was a call up to the World Equestrian Games in Caen, which was that absolutely...
Hang on, Nicole. You can't gloss over badminton in 2014. I mean, that was the mental one.
That was the mental. To be fair, 2014 was a tough old year for horses that went to badminton in those really, really tough conditions and then went to the World Games in Caen as well, because they were two of the toughest tracks that we've seen in the sport in recent years.
And how brave is this guy? That was his first, highest level 4-star, then 5-star now. I mean, what a tough horse. Then that first exposure to, pretty much the hardest cross-country day that we've known in the last God knows how many years, probably equal to Caen, which was later on in the year as well. I mean, I remember thinking, I think we talked about it on the pod before, after that cross-country day at badminton, there was a lot of discussion about how a lot of these horses were going to come out of it. It was that tough a day. And, that was 2014, and think what he's gone on and done after that. I mean, what sheer toughness from the guy. And it was, he was brilliant that day, and he picked up an unfortunate 21. So
21
the French ball pin
in those days was a French ball pin, wasn't it?
Which was, and that penalty was absolutely my fault. If I hadn't got the distance wrong, he'd have jumped it no problem. But that was hard to take for me, because it was one of those ones where I thought, I didn't get that right. He jumped his way out of trouble, or tried to the best he could, but. So that was frustrating, and sad, because you know scenarios you feel like you let the horse down. You can only do as much. There's a partnership, so you can only do as much as you can. And every cross country round has its moments. You very rarely get that foot perfect round where you deliver at every fence, because it's it's an in the moment thing, cross country, more so than anything else. Where horses don't actually jump in the way you think they're going to do, or they make up more ground than you think they're going to make up, and then you've got to react in the moment. But so he, like Spike said, he did so well to jump his way around there.
Would they?
And it didn't suit him. The ground didn't suit him.
Oh.
I was going to say that wouldn't be the sort of conditions that he would have really enjoyed either, would they? He would perhaps prefer going that's on the much more firm side compared to this absolute mud slog that was badminton and Caen that year.
Oh yeah, well that's without a doubt. I mean, if you take the World Championships at Caen, or sort of Arastapan, where it was we're all there. It was tipping down with rain. You'd done a nice dressage, and we were walking the cross country and all that, and you were hoping that, it was going to ride better than it walked. And I went out of the start box and felt the ground over the first 2 or 3 fences. And I just remember saying to myself, if I just don't go slowly here, this guy will never get around this track, because he will just run out of energy. Because he wasn't like that classic mile Janelle that just had 5 gears and could just gallop forever. He would hit a wall. He was so brave and genuine to keep cantering. So it was frustrating. He was again super genuine, jumped his way around the World Championship track, but I had to nurse him home from a long way out. And I think, if you remember, you came across that water jump, jumped up that big step to that fish, which a lot of people struggle at. And he still, even though he was tired, and he still had a bit of a hill to go then, he was tired, but he still just dug deep, and he had enough energy, didn't never say no, and he kept going, and then we got him home. But the sad thing in that event was he cut into himself badly in the cross country, overreached, and was basically on 3 legs. He had a big cut in his heel and couldn't trot up and show jump the last day. And he was the sort of horse that you really wanted to jump on the last day because you knew you had a chance of a clear round. But it was a testament to him that he kept going in that round.
I think it also is a testament to him that at the World Games, he jumped a super clear round, as you've said, with time penalties, but unfortunately wasn't able to complete. He gave you your first senior flag for Australia, is that right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and then he came out the following spring. So he's had a really tough 2014 with badminton and the World Championships in Caen. And then he comes out in 2015 and he goes to Belton for the short format 3-star, 4-star as it is now, that spring, Bill. And he was just magic. He finished second and he put in an absolutely superb performance in the first phase. I think he led the dressage. It was a 36.6 in sort of old money, so to speak.
Money,
so
yeah.
So you 36.6, do the quick maths, divide that by 1.5, 24.4 in new money. And he ended up finishing second behind Clark Montgomery and Loch and Glen. But how special was it that he came out that following spring and it just shows his strength of character after those 2 really tough events. And actually, he was better than ever.
Yeah, no, he was the sort of horse that would keep improving, and so that was a tough one to lose, that Grantham Cup, because I had the last show jump down, which really annoyed me. But anyway, these things happen. So, but he was brilliant, and cross country is brilliant, and he was good at the short format. So and in those days he was, he was probably a little fitter than he would have been at the latter part in the ERMs. He wasn't quite as fit because he wouldn't take as much work as he did in those days. As he got older, you couldn't gallop him as much because he just would get niggles and then start to feel his legs. So you just had to be quite measured as to how much fitness you could get into him. But in those days, with that bit more gallop work, then he could go a little bit faster.
Yeah, I think that's fair, Bill, isn't it? He had little niggles, didn't he? And you guys, the team Levett, did such a super job managing him and managing his fitness as best. These horses at the highest level, you do walk a little bit of a tightrope along with getting them as fit as you can and the work into them as much as you can, yet managing their legs and their soundness as best as you can. And you guys always did such an amazing job with him from that point of view, because he did pick up a little niggle here and there, and he needed a little bit of appropriate management. And I mean, it really was gold standard care that he got, and that's how he managed to be, to be the great horse that he was all the way through. And I think you're right there, Bill. Like in the, when he in those days of his 2 Badmintons and Weg, he was probably a little bit easier to train, wasn't he? We weren't having to manage quite so many little things that these horses pick up over time, which meant that you could potentially have him a smidge fitter, and have that little bit of extra work into him than he was able to get in later, in his later years. But I mean, he was tough. He was tough, and all these guys, all these horses that compete into them, into their late teens at the highest level, have to have that kind of constitution to be able to, to keep jumping and keep doing it and keep galloping with bits of wear and tear going on. And he was just brilliant, and he was so good at that. Yet equally, he could have the tiniest little nick or cut, and you think his leg had fallen off. Well, he's just a bloke. We overthink everything. We stub our toe, we think our leg's fallen off.
There was plenty of times where I thought, wow, you keep coming up and you keep coming, putting your head above the parapet or whatever. And so, a lot of horses don't do that, and Alfie did. So although he could have had his times where you thought, he's a bit overreacting, I sort of cut him a fair bit of slack in that way, because at the end of the day, when he was always asked a question, he'd always say, okay, all right, let's get on with it,
It
Yeah,
did
when it
seem
when
that
it when it when it really came down to it, yeah.
It was, when it mattered and he had to dig deep, he absolutely 100% did. But that actually almost makes him more special because he obviously had the brain that was very much of the sort of winner's mentality, genuine, wanted to please, wanted to get it right. And it was just sort of outside of that he would occasionally, I know Jenny, your wife, Bill, said that you had to use a lot of bubble wrap and sort of try and keep him safe in between. But actually, he was just the most genuine horse.
Yeah, and Jenny's, she manages all the detail and the team and the guys on the yard, and she corresponds with the head girl. So she runs all the detail. So she was, and she's extremely good at managing detail. So that was, Jenny was one of the big reasons why, he was, with that and Spike and, that team all around him was able to keep him competitive. He had this one funny thing where when he was standing in the stable, he used to put his front feet way out in front and his hind legs miles out the back. And he just used to stand like that for hours, even to the point when you're at 3 days, people that were stabled near you would come and try and find you and say, I think you need to come and have a look at your horse because I think he's colicking. I think there's something not right with him. And I'd say, what's he doing? Oh, his front feet are miles out and his hind legs are like they're way out. He's really in pain, very discomfort, I think, I said, oh, no, he does that all the time, don't worry.
And he did that from a young horse as well. Like we looked everywhere.
From a young horse as well.
Yeah. Before he was ridden by you, Bill. Like I remember looking at, we probably put an endoscope everywhere that we could put an endoscope to try and find if there was anything causing it. And he had gold standard care to try and find what was driving this. And we even guesstimated on treatments and nothing changed it. It's just how he liked to stand.
Yeah, mate. Yeah, that's right. He did it till the very last days of his competition career. That's for sure.
Can we talk? I mean, talking about managing him and sort of wrapping him in bubble wrap, but keeping him right at top level. He went on for another top 20 finish at Badminton in 2015. And then from 2016, his attention was focused on the short format 4-star, and the Event Rider Master Series really, really played into all of his strengths because he was very good, as we've said in the first phase. He was a very, very good show jumper and he was very reliable cross country. So all of that has meant that we've seen him feature in many a top 10 in the ERM series. But I've got a stat for you on his career because this is quite incredible. So he has 37 runs at 4-star short level since this decade. And that is more starts than any other horse at the level. So 37. And then you take 37, he had an opposition beaten percentage of 71%. So he beat over 70% of his opponents that he came up against. And in that number of runs, that is just the most remarkable record. And huge credit to you all because he found so much strength in terms of the length of his career and has been to top level and has really excelled at it. And then going through the RM series, Bill, he actually, we always smiled when Alfie came into the arena, and he was always one of those horses that, well, we're not allowed to have favorites, really. He was always my favorite. But it was a series that was just made for him. Everything about it suited him down to the ground.
Yeah, no, he did. He was, as we've said earlier, he was a great mover. He had great presence, and it took a while to get to know what was the best setup for him in the dressage, because he was a big horse, and he wasn't a naturally strong horse that could just work with the collection and things required for long periods of time. So it was funny. In the end, the best way to get a test out of him was about a couple of hours before. You'd give him about half an hour school on the flat. And because he knew all his stuff, you'd bring him over about 10 minutes before you went in, go through a few of the patterns and go in. And that was his best way. If you tried to work him too hard before he went into the dressage, wouldn't, he'd think, no, this is all too hard for me. I'm physically, feeling the pinch, and I won't work as well. So it was, but he was, as you say, he was super reliable. I mean, the only slightly frustrating thing for me was at times when we started the cross country, I knew that I couldn't go as fast as some of the other guys. So it was, I knew that he would be super genuine, and that, if I gave him a good ride, I'd put him on the right line, that he would jump nearly everything you put him at. But, he just didn't have that extra gear. And so it was frustrating sometimes, but, in the big scheme of things, he always delivered. So that was, that sort of outweighed that sometimes frustrating feeling of, oh no, how am I going to live with these guys when I know they can come in under time, and I'm going to get a few time penalties no matter how fast I go.
He, in the first year of the Event Rider Masters, was 4th at Bramham. So he just finished off the podium. And from there, he picked up a whole host of top 10 placings in the series. He was 5th at Blenheim in the series finale in a really, really hot competition year in 2017. He had been 6th in Wiesbaden. And he hadn't quite made it onto that podium until we came to Arveil in 2018, Bill. Now, a lot of people that we speak to, is one of their highlights, because to see him get onto that podium and get that top 3 finish that we all knew he could get, we knew you could get. And Arveil is not an easy cross-country track, and it is not an easy place to get the time. And he came home with only a handful of time faults. I mean, he was only sort of 7 or so seconds over the time. He was incredible over that weekend, and it must have been a pretty special moment for you as well.
Yes, it was one of the, it was the highlight of his DRM career for me, just because I felt so pleased for him, because he deserved it. All the effort he put in, all the times he just dug so deep. And, so it was, it was just, that was one of the highlights for sure.
He also, in 2019, gave you a real shot at a series podium finish. Unfortunately, it didn't get to be the fairy tale because he retired before the series finale in Lignières. But again, it is strength of depth of one horse giving you those top results to put you in that series position. What is life in retirement like for him now? Is he enjoying being a sort of a life out in the field? Because I think he enjoyed his winter holidays, didn't he? He likes being left to be.
He loved being natural and being roughed off, and he's quite the boss in most of the group as well. So we had a young horse come the other day, and Alfie out there with three others, in a field, and there was no way he was letting that guy into the group. To the point where we had to take the horse out and put it in another field in the end, because Alfie was, every chance he got, given a bit of a duff up, saying, this is my place, you just keep out of it.
I'm the boss.
Yeah, exactly. So, he's, he does love just getting out and roughing it, really. I think he's had a long career, so he likes just getting out and just being a horse and just chilling, out with a group of other horses. Yeah.
And Bill, what would you say is, in hindsight, you've ridden him for how many years, and you go back to that first time you tried him, and I think you said already that you rode him and you thought you had a proper one there, and you said that to the owners. What would you say is his greatest attribute? What was the thing that made you think that, this guy could be proper?
Well, in the early days, I didn't really know, but for me, over the time I was with him, his greatest attribute was his genuineness, his ability to not try and be clever. You put me on the line, I know my job, I'll absolutely try for you. You give me a good ride to a show jump, I'm going to put a lot of effort in to try and help you go clear. You set me up well for the dressage, I'll show you how big my medium trot is or my extended canter. He was just, he wasn't complicated like that. He wasn't trying to work against you. If you did your part and you set him up right for the different things, he was just consistent. He was there, and that comes down to his attitude. And even sometimes when you slightly get the wrong line cross country, he'd sort of realise what had happened and sort of readjust himself to say, look, I know what you mean, so I'll do it for you. And that really, that sort of gets to you as a rider, or it does to me. It doesn't maybe to every rider, but it's one thing I like about the sport, spending a long time with a horse that you really like and you get emotionally connected to it. And you become aware, even it might be subconsciously, that they've really dug deep for you. And the level of connection gets a bit more, where you just get connected to them more as individuals. And he was, he was one of those, sure.
And what would you say was your, favorite cross country round, or favorite moment, or something that you'll kind of think back on with the greatest fondness with him?
Well, there's a couple. One of the favourite moments was winning Samur, because for me, as I say, I'd been for a whole lot and I hadn't won it. And at that stage, it was and it still is, it was a high profile 3-star, now 4-star, and good competition. And it was just, it just all came together, And so that was one of them. And the other thing was, he gave me my first senior championship. And that was always a dream, to try and make it to a championship, So he gave me that, and, that's something that will, be there forever in that sense. As I've had a lot of horses before that, and for various reasons it didn't quite work out. So it was he was the first one that took me to a World Championships.
What's your Shannondale Titan highlight, Spike?
Samur, I mean, I wasn't there at Samur. It's probably a good thing. I remember that hugely, because he would be the first horse I was closely associated with to win a long 4-star as it is now. So that was a sort of a proud professional moment. But for Alfie as a horse, I think I do remember a time. It's funny how you remember little things. Like I remember him managing to, I think if he got himself either cast or he knocked himself rolling just days before Blenheim 8-9-year-olds one year, Bill, and he must have done. He knocked himself near his stifle, and it was just a small cut. But as I say, just occasionally he'd just think, he'd think it was the end of the world, and we were really worried that he might have done some damage to the joint or this or that. And 12 hours later, he was looking at us going, actually, I'm fine, thanks. There's no problem here, guys. And off he went. And then he managed to, I remember going to watch the show jumping, and he pulled a shoe off just before you were about to go in and jump. And then that, just having to stand around and wait and having to be reshod, just, I think it maybe just, he lost his concentration a bit. But, it's those sort of things where you'd have you go through a little bit of the sort of the drama to get these guys to the competition, and then you still can't account for something as silly as putting a show off in the show jumping warm up. But little things like that. I've got great memories with him. I think back to the time around Samur or Weg, and Claire Prentice's owner coming to the yard, and you had Emily Littlejohn as the head girl at the yard at those times, and with Jenny there, and we had you had such a great team there, with your Ferry and Nick Deacon and the, physio chiropractor Maggie Turner, and everyone just working so closely to get him there at the World Championships in the best possible, in the best possible care. And it's things like that that just stick in the memory. Those sort of, working as within a great team, and being part of that, that behind the scenes to get a horse to to something that would fulfill, as you said already, Bill, your ambitions as well. So yeah, it's stuff like that that really sticks in my mind, I have to say. Can
you sum him up in 3 words, Bill?
Yeah, I'd say genuine, beautiful, and genuine.
Yes, he was. Well, he still is unbelievably beautiful. He was always one of those horses.
He came into the dressage on his day, and he was like,
he had real presence, doesn't he? Like he's one of those horses that you really warm to and you want to watch, and you sort of sit up and pay attention. And I have to admit, I've got a lot of happy memories. I think my highlight, as I've said, is definitely Arveal 2018, because to get on that podium was absolutely brilliant. And I think he competed in something like 20 of the 25 ERM legs that we've had so far, which is just amazing.
And it was one of those special moments. It was because we were trying to do it for so long and, very close. And then to just achieve that was just satisfying for him and for me. Yeah, it was very good,
Yeah, absolutely. And he was a horse, actually, Bill, that was a real part of the whole family. And I think Josh, your son, would be able to even ride him out when he was fit, wouldn't he?
Oh, yeah. That was the great thing about Alfie. Anyone could ride him. He was just so genuine. He was just one of those types where he just endeared himself to everyone. The only times when he didn't, when he was self-harming in his stable and everyone would go, "Oh, Alfie, what have you done now?" Didn't think it was possible, as Spike said, nothing major, but he would just find ways of what we call self-harming, and everyone would sort of shake their heads and think, "Wow,
think what next?"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but
and then Spike could rock up at the yard again, Bill, and you'd think, "Oh God."
But it is nice. It is nice, in terms of the eventing job, is to have a good team of people to rely on. That's one of the satisfying things as well. No one's trying to play blame games if things go wrong, but it's just getting groups of people that you trust and know that they're really genuinely interested, and that makes it all the more special too when things go right. That those other people, like Spike saying, get a kick out of being involved, helping a horse to realise its potential, and then seeing it go and do that is very satisfying. Yeah.
It really is. And it is a huge team effort. And you were a wonderful, wonderful partnership. We've thoroughly enjoyed watching you throughout the years. And there's that one word that I think has shone throughout this entire show, in that he was just so genuine. And just such a lovely person as well. He is one of our favourites. Spike, I know he's got secretly one of your actual favourites.
It's not a secret anymore, though, is it? Really?
It's out there now. Bill, thank you for coming on and talking to us about him, because it has been an absolute pleasure to hear more about him as a horse, but also to relive some of the highlights of his career. He has been an absolute superstar. So thank you very much.
No, that's my pleasure, and it's always nice to talk about Alfie and just highlight what a great horse he was. Yeah.
He absolutely has been a superstar for you. Spike, thank you. Bill, thank you. Listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this special episode of Horse Heroes, all about Shannondale Titan, who has been an absolutely massive star for Bill, for Australia at the very top level. We will be back very soon with another episode. In fact, if you've got any suggestions of horses that you would like us to do an episode on, then get in touch at Eventing Podcast. We would love to hear from you. But for now, that is all we've got time for. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for listening to the EquiRatings Eventing Podcast. This podcast is available for free on iTunes, Spotify, Podcast Addict, or wherever you usually listen to your podcasts. Make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. Find us at eventingpodcast.com or search Eventing Podcast on social media.